more transmissible than the previous known types, reported Reuters. His laboratory cultures of the new variant showed the virus replicated itself very quickly, possibly explaining why so many new cases had appeared in different parts of the country in a short period of time. And it goes into some numbers here. Vietnam has so far seen just over 7,100 COVID-19 cases and 47 deaths. That's very low, but more than 4,000 of these cases have emerged in an outbreak that first came to light on April 27th, and which has been detected in 34 cities and provinces. The World Health Organization, which has identified 4 variants of concern. Really? Only 4? That article we just read had like 9 of them.
I think the variants had more VOIs than VOCs.
Oh, okay, VOC. Okay. Emerging from the UK, India, South Africa, and Brazil is currently investigating Vietnam's findings. Maria Van Kerkhove, isn't she the one that came up with the names? Yep. WHO technical lead for COVID-19 said currently the variant detected in Vietnam was understood to be B1617.2 variant, more commonly known as the Indian variant, possibly with an additional mutation, but that more information will be provided when it was received. And it goes on. We don't have to get too into the weeds here with the story, but yeah, it's just interesting how one by one, countries of interest locked down. The pandemic has, it doesn't end. Never ends. It just kind of keeps going. And it's
interesting because they're identifying smaller and smaller amounts of cases, but reacting stronger and stronger to it. Yeah. So I believe China just had a lockdown in Guangzhou because they found like some small, like 12 cases or something. So they locked down the entire city. And then that's exactly what happened in Australia. I may be wrong on these numbers, but I think it was like 7 cases.
I think it was 7 people infected something.
Were infected in Australia, and they locked the whole country down. So, they still got this trigger happy control syndrome that they love. But it's just being activated by smaller and smaller amounts of COVID. So
this is so transhuman, the whole deal, because ultimately where this is headed, if we're looking at the trajectory of things, is if you get sick, you are part of the old human race. You must be vaccinated, you must upgrade, you must all these things, genetically speaking now.
Yeah, well, especially since they're not reporting breakthrough cases anymore. Yeah. They're not recording them.
Yeah, and somebody had sent us, and I appreciate the emails we always get. I can't remember who it was. I think it was on Patreon, actually. Someone sent us, there was a little conference, and you'll find the link to it in the additional story section at canarycrynewstalk.com and the show notes there. But there was a virtual conference on something called the DNA Barcode Symposium. And basically their whole thing was, trying to create barcodes for DNA to identify and catalog and everything else with all the various types of life on Earth. But ultimately, having a barcode associated with your DNA is very dystopian. It's just straight up like, hey,
well, what it's really reminiscent of is like 1990s theories about the mark of the beast.
Yeah.
All the early sort of mark of the beast theories that were floating around, at least what I was taught during the sort of fringy churches that I would go to in the 90s. They were like, oh, we're all going to have barcodes on our forehead, these evil barcodes, which is kind of why I chuckle a little bit at people who think not at them, but I chuckle at the idea that, QR code is the mark of the beast. Because really, the QR code is just a different shape of a barcode, which is just a different shape of a set of numbers. And of course,
but
now
shapes
we've got
matter, Basil.
Microchips and magnetoproteins that are looking a little bit closer to a legitimate theory, but I don't know. The barcode thing gives me a wonderful nostalgia for 90s Mark of the Beast theories.
Yeah. Well, and something to just as a side note here, and we can kind of go into the last story before the break. But yeah, I found myself kind of, I guess I was triggered on Twitter. Oh, imagine that I was triggered on Twitter because somebody had posted like, hey, there's magnetic nanosensors in the vaccines.
Right.
So I was like, oh, is there like documented evidence for that? And then they sent me like, there's lipid nanoparticles in the vaccines. And it was like, no, that's not what you said that, whatever. So anyway, I get people are sort of, just
that word nano,
theories.
Man. Every time somebody hears nano, they think of Matrix style octopus robots floating through your bloodstream.
And admittedly, if you look at the history of lipid nanoparticles, it was only approved in 2018 and whatever. And it's whatever.
And they are weird, and they do have some strange qualities. But they're not little robots.
But that's not the same as what is it? Magnetic nanosensors. And if you're claiming there's magnetic nanosensors in the vaccine, show me the documentation. I wouldn't be surprised at all if there was, but just show me the documents. And if you can't have the documents, show me the documents.
I'm more interested in the magnetoproteins. I mean, that solves a lot of problems already. Yeah. All right. One last story before we take a little producer party here. Are you ready?
I am definitely ready for this one. I'm stoked.
So stoked. This is coming from dailymail.com. The headline is Wuhan lab is still conducting the same research. Mike Pompeo warns Institute of Virology is continuing to conduct secret military experiments and more deadly viruses could escape.
It's all going to end.
Yeah. Mike Pompeo, the former CIA director and Secretary of State, has said that Wuhan Institute of Virology was conducting secret military research and claims there is enormous evidence that the virus that caused COVID-19 escaped from the lab. Donald Trump's former top aide also warned that the dangerous experimentation is ongoing at the lab, raising the specter of another potentially deadly virus leak. Quote, what I can say for sure is this. We know that they are engaged in efforts connected to the People's Liberation Army inside of that laboratory. So military activities being performed alongside that they claimed was just good old civilian research, Pompeo told Fox News on Saturday. Quote, they refused to tell us what it was. They refused to describe the nature of either of those. They refused to allow access to the World Health Organization, Pompeo said. Quote, that cover-up alone suggests there's a lot more that we need to know. Quote, that virology lab is still up and running. It's still probably conducting the same kinds of research it was conducting that may have well led to this virus escaping from that laboratory, he said. Quote, only the Chinese Communist Party knows the answer. The world deserves the answers, and they have to tell us. I hope there will be a bipartisan push to demand and hold accountable, said Pompeo. He spoke after President Joe Biden ordered an intensive 90-day probe to reinvestigate the possibility of a lab leak origin in the pandemic. Quote, it's really unfortunate they took the position early on that there was nothing to see here, Pompeo said in response to the new probe. I'm glad now that they're looking at this. I hope it's a serious investigation.
I hope it's a glorious investigation that reveals the truth of all things.
I hope it's a serious investigation. When they say they're giving 90 days for the intelligence community to look at this, the intelligence community has been looking at this for an awfully long time, he said. Yep, as we know, the intelligence community has been considering lab leaks since January of 2020. Pompeo, a former CIA spy chief, has promoted the lab leak theory since the early days of the pandemic, a theory that until recently, much of the U.S. media and academia scoffed at as fringe conspiracy theory. I've known since spring of last year, 2020, when I first spoke about this, that there is enormous evidence that this escaped from that laboratory in Wuhan, he said on Saturday. Quote, we know there were people who got sick there, scientists who got sick there. We know they were doing the gain of function research, essentially taking viruses and making them more contagious, potentially more lethal. This administration has to get after this. Quote, this administration has to get after this. I hope they will continue the work that we are engaged in, said Pompeo. Quote, this is important work. We have to know how this happened so we can make sure this never happens again. It is not the first time Pompeo claimed links between the Wuhan Institute of Virology and the Chinese military. In the final days of the Trump administration, Pompeo led State Department. This kind of goes on and on. I don't know if I want to go into the history. We know
you
that
don't have to. I think
talking
most of
about
our
this.
listeners know.
Yeah.
And it goes into some stuff that we already covered. So.
Yeah.
The Norwegian and British scientists who came out and said that they have like hard evidence, basically beyond reasonable doubt, that it was laboratory created. So yeah, we know about that. And
not weird scientists either. They're the head. One of them is the chair of a vaccine company, and the other one
created the HIV vaccine.
Created the HIV vaccine. Yes, pro-vaccine scientists coming out and saying this was created and engineered in a lab. But it does bring up the specter again of Donald Trump, which has been getting a lot more attention in the news lately, and we are going to talk about that after we take a very short break.
It's break time! Come on, take a break.
That's right, folks. We're going to take a quick break, have a little producer party. But don't worry, don't go anywhere. After the break, Trump apparently telling people he will be reinstated as president by August.
Trump's picking up where Q left off.
I know, but we'll see.
Maybe he was Q all along.
There's a couple of twists and turns in that story you're not going to want to miss out on. And then, of course, it's a movement to try to dethrone Bibi over there. We'll have a little bit of Israel news. And then, of course, a couple of beast system updates there. Let's see. We got, Solar Winds hack update, which is, that was one of the weird things. The biggest hack in basically the history of the world happened. We heard about it for a week connected to, U.S. infrastructure, and then it totally disappeared. This is Solar Winds back in November or something like that. Mm-hmm. But we've got an update on that. And then, of course, meat lovers. The hacks aren't, they're not going to let you off the hook. So stick around, everybody, after the break. But first, let's thank some producers. Now, Gons, interesting series of events has happened since last show. Number one, we've gotten plenty of what is the word? Compliments. Is it weird that I couldn't remember the word compliments?
Yes.
Some compliments on the little chat we had the other day about the value for value model. But also this producer segment was last episode. We made the decision, because it's episode 345, we made the decision to dedicate it to accountants and children who can count to 5. And I think we've learned what people think about accountants and children who can count to 5. Because people were not necessarily inspired to produce the show in gratitude to their accountants. But that's okay. So I don't know if this dedication thing is working too well. I thought maybe it would add another layer of meaningfulness and motivation for producers of the show. Seems to be having the entirely opposite effect. Do you have an opinion on this?
I think we need to think through who we dedicate these segments to a little bit more and not try to come up with them on the fly, which seems to be a problem.
I guess. Big Time Killer 44 in the Twitch chat says that they are an accountant. We have an accountant watching the show live. You're really the only accountant to have identified themselves. So this is all thanks to you there, Big Time Killer 44. I'm not going to lie. If my accountant had a Twitch account called Big Time Killer 44, I don't know. I don't know if that would, I think for me personally, I would be just tickled by that. I'm not sure if My parents would
He's a
like
time,
an accountant named Big Time.